Welcome back to my channel, everyone. I'm Mary Lynch of Braving Midlife, where I help women transition from career into the next phase of their life. And today I am joined with Jana Sanchez, which I'm super excited about because we've got an awful lot to talk about considering what's going on in the world. For those of you that are new to the channel, welcome. I'm so happy that you found us, and I value your time. So I hope that you'll get as much out of this conversation with Jana as I hope you will, because I find this topic super, super exciting and with a lot going on. I first heard about Jana. Jana, I think it was from a New York Times article. Was that right?
It was probably the New Yorker. They did a big
The New
feature about
Yorker.
their September group tour.
Yeah, so that was when I read that article, I immediately reached out to her because of the type of value that she offers to her clients. So Jana is the co-founder of GTFO Tours, which helps Americans find peace. Now, I think that that's a great word considering what's going on. Find peace and safety abroad, which for some people, it's hard to believe, especially Americans, it's hard to believe that you could actually feel safe in another country other than America. So that's something that we can talk about also. But Jana advises Americans on their options for living abroad through the entire process, from visas, housing, education, work, and other topics. She's a former nominee for US Congress who has lived in the Netherlands and the UK for over 2 decades. So she's got a lot of experience here. Returning after 10 years in the US in January 2015. She is a former journalist and once ran a pan-European public relations agency with partners. She has a BA in political science from Rice University and speaks Dutch well enough to get by, which I like that. And I'm probably going to butcher this name, Jana. She lives in Haarlem.
Haarlem, perfect. Yes.
Haarlem in the Netherlands with her Dutch husband and 2 rescue dogs. So Jana, I know that we have an awful lot to cover here, and I am thrilled that you said yes to this. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Okay, so let's get right into it. There are some things that I want to make sure that we cover. I'm trying to get this as concise as we can to let people know that of the services that you offer to them and why they would need to consider hiring a relocation coach or a relocation expert. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how this all came about.
As you mentioned, I ran for US Congress, and for the years from 2016 to November 2025, I was very busy trying to change things in the US to try to make it return to democracy, return to progressive, to be a progressive country again. And I failed. And after Trump won again, I didn't feel safe anymore living in the US. So immediately I started helping other people who also didn't feel safe and wanted to understand, could they go abroad? Um, so I did that through my old congressional website or campaign page on Facebook, where I had a lot of followers. So I just started holding webinars and other ways for people to help each other figure out how to get out. When I moved back to the Netherlands, which I moved back by January 15th of 2025, I wanted to get here before the inauguration. I met Bethany Quinn, who is my business partner in GTFO Tours. We thought about what can we provide to Americans who are moving abroad, and who are looking for safety and security. So we decided the thing that we would like to do would be relocation tours to help people understand what it's like to live abroad in the Netherlands specifically. But as the business progressed, we ended up both doing relocation coaching. And I would say about half of the people who come to us aren't coming to the Netherlands. They are trying to figure out if they can move abroad, how they can move abroad, and where they can move to. So about half of our work ends up sending people to other countries around Europe and the world. And the other half helps people who are coming to the Netherlands. And of course, many people ultimately don't end up moving abroad, but they're still in the planning phase or they're still considering it. But it's a big decision, of course.
Yes, it is a big decision. I moved abroad 11 years ago now, and quite honestly, I have to say it was the best decision that I have ever made for myself and really my family, even though I do miss my daughters and grandchildren on a, on a, however, more often I might have seen them. But quite honestly, at least when I go back to America, I have their undivided attention,
Yeah.
which wasn't that way before. So it's
Yeah.
actually kind of a win-win
Yeah. Yeah.
situation. So tell us about how do people decide where to live, the different types of visas, and the opportunity for second passports? Talk to us through that process.
So generally, let me back up a little bit. When people contact us,
Okay.
they don't know what the options are. They usually think they have no options or they have options that really don't exist. And people are usually really wrong about what their options are. They think they can go to Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the UK, and Ireland, which are probably the hardest places in the world to go to. And or they think that they have no options because they don't have $1 million or whatever. So it's really helping people first figure out what are your options. What visas do you qualify for? What countries can you afford to go to? What countries do you want to go to? And how does that all come together, taking into consideration whether you need to earn money or not, or whether you
Mhm.
need to retire and spend money. Maybe this would be a good time to talk about the 4 different types of visas, generally speaking. There are probably others, but the main types fall into digital nomad, entrepreneur, highly skilled migrant visas. Those are the first 3, and those are all for people who still need to earn money. And then the fourth category is passive income, which is also called a retiree visa. Sometimes it's an investor visa. Sometimes it's called a golden visa. But that's a category for people who do not need to earn money and generally have a lot of money, or at least enough money to live without working. So there are 4 different types of visas. So we help them figure out where they can go to. Also, about 40% of Americans qualify for a second passport. That would be mainly to places like Poland, and Lithuania, Germany, Austria, Ireland, some in Italy still, although that's become much harder. And then you
Yeah.
also have people, for instance, who, if they can get to Spain for 2 years, either via digital nomad or a non-digital, non-lucrative visa, they can get a citizenship within 2 years because they also have a citizenship with a Latin American or Philippine ancestor. So if you have a connection with almost any place that was a former colony of Spain and Brazil, then you can usually get your Spanish passport within 2 years versus waiting 10 years. So, kind of like knowing all of this and helping people work through, like, where were your grandparents born? Do you need to work? How much money do you have available? What are your concerns about tax rates? All of that stuff. And then, can you be self-employed or do you need a job? So we work through all of that. And then usually it's really obvious. Most people have 1 or 2 or 3 or more choices of countries they can go to. Then it becomes about cost of living, taxation rate, cost of getting settled. Some countries cost a lot to get settled because you might have to pay a year's rent up front. Other countries cost a lot less. So it's just really working through all of that. Oh, sorry. And another factor is, can you get a passport for the country that you're moving to if you also don't qualify for a second passport somewhere else?
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even know that that was an option.
Yeah, I would say about half of the countries either offer a passport within 5 years. The other half offer a passport within 10 years. The difference is some countries will not allow a second passport. You have to give up your original passport, which a lot of people don't want to do. So
Mhm.
it's really just working through what are your top priorities. If getting an EU passport is a priority, but you don't want to give up your American passport, you've already narrowed it down to about 4 or 5 or 6 countries, depending on your situation.
Ah, fascinating. So, do you have is there an age group, or is this like spread out because of the things that are happening in the US right now? Is the age group widened as it closed in?
It's remained pretty consistently, I would say, mid 30s, like young families who are worried about gun violence, who are worried about education, who might have neurodiverse or gender non-binary children, all the way up to retirees. So I've had clients in their 90s who want to go abroad, and that can
Oh
be
my
challenging.
gosh.
But most people are probably in the 50s and 60s, which is a great age. That's absolutely fine. Really, any age is okay. There is an option for you no matter your age. People are often misinformed that you have to be young. And it's true, to go some places, it really helps you to be young. You get more points if it's a point system. If you're younger, if you're in your 30s or even in your late 20s, more countries want you.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Okay, so what about the the if somebody is coming in and they need to make money, and what are there better countries that they should be looking at? What are the types of things? I recognize that if they have children, then that probably adds in a whole different kind of
Yes,
conversation as to the places that would be best for that to happen.
yes,
Um, and language, I know
yes.
in my
Language.
in my experience, I know that Americans are pretty language phobic, and that
Yeah,
most Americans do not speak a second language, and
yeah,
they're terrified to go
yes.
someplace
Yeah.
where English would be the second or the third language for many people.
So you can go to most countries if you need to earn, if you are going in as a highly skilled migrant, but that's very, very hard. Digital nomads, there are dozens and dozens of countries that allow digital nomads. So if you are able to produce enough income to qualify for a digital nomad visa as an independent contractor working for clients abroad, so not in the country that you're going to, most people can do that, or many people can do that. The third type, if you look at entrepreneur visas, if you can start a business, if you can invest in a business, at least enough to get started. So in Europe, okay, digital nomad visas, again, many, many options. If you can be freelance, many, many options. Now, if you want to work in Europe where you would eventually get an EU passport, probably the two most popular countries outside of those that offer classic digital nomad visas, where you can work on the ground, are the Netherlands as an entrepreneur and Germany as an educated person with high skills or a tradesperson with high skills. Germany has something called the Chancenkart, which allows you to go there for a year. If you have enough points, you need 6 points, which is based on education, background, language, and all of that, that makes you an attractive candidate. You can go on the Chancenkart, look for a job. We've had clients who have gone to Germany and gotten a job within 2 weeks. There are a lot of jobs in Germany, especially in technology, in renewable energy, and in skilled trades as well. So that's a good option if you need to work on the ground and you can't start a business. The other really easy one, or easy from a visa perspective, is the Netherlands, where you have the DAFT visa. The DAFT visa stands for Dutch American Friendship Treaty visa, and it's an entrepreneur visa. The investment amount is only 4,500 euros, which most people can do. The challenge becomes you need to make a viable business. You don't have to have a business plan. You don't have to prove that you're going to make a certain amount of money, but you just need to have a viable business to live on. And it can be quite expensive to get started because of the housing crisis in the Netherlands. So generally speaking, we would advise, like, if you don't have 50,000 euros of cash, it may be difficult to go there. Not impossible, but difficult. And so really those are, generally speaking, the two best options in Europe for people who need to earn money. And of course, they both have excellent education systems. They both have excellent healthcare systems. And you can get a passport after 5 years in either country. In the Netherlands, you can get a Dutch passport, but you have to give up your American passport. In Germany, you can get a German passport, but you don't have to give up your US passport. So that's more attractive to a lot of people as well. But the difference is that you really, like, German is a really hard language. And if you haven't studied it before, you're going to really have to focus on learning German. It also affects your point system if you already speak German, at least at an A1 level. In the Netherlands, you do need to speak Dutch, especially if you're the partner of the entrepreneur, or the dafter, as we call them, because the partner is allowed to work without a work permit. And then you need to speak Dutch generally to get a job. But you can take a little while longer to learn Dutch, and it's an easier language. It's closer to English than German is. It's probably somewhere in between German and English.
I don't know. Yeah, I have struggled for the past 11 years in learning Polish. I
I
know
think it's a
enough to
hard
get
language.
by,
Mhm.
but I certainly don't know enough to be at conversation level yet. Anyway, I keep saying that's going to change, but I'm not so sure about that.
I suspect Polish is one of the harder languages for Americans to learn. But it's
Mhm.
really important to keep in mind that a lot of Americans qualify for Polish passports through ancestry. If
Yes.
you can go back pretty far, and if you have great grandparents who can trace, if you can trace them back to Poland, in many cases you qualify for a Polish passport. And you don't have to live in Poland. If you have a Polish passport, you can live anywhere in the EU. But it's also a really popular place for people to move to.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have enjoyed being here. We came here for health reasons, and also my husband was born here. He actually defected to the US under the solidarity movement.
Mm.
So now he's back again, and Poland is a whole different place from the times when he was here, and it's been a really wonderful experience personally, a personal growth journey for
Yeah.
me, certainly. So tell me about, I have a lot of people that will say to me things like, oh, they want to move abroad, but they say, oh, I could never move abroad because of my family. And it's almost like, how can you be away from your family? And I feel like sometimes it's almost like a guilt trip that's there about, you know, do I love my children less because I have chosen to live abroad? But in actuality, as I said earlier, when I'm in America visiting them, I get my fill. I think we both get our fill of one another for either the year or sometimes I'm able to go twice a year. So talk to us about like the emotional roller coaster that one might experience in either deciding to move abroad or actually taking the leap and moving abroad.
It is a big step, and it isn't for everyone. People who feel safe in the U.S., and who are happy being around their family and don't have any concerns about what's happening with the government and with the world, probably moving abroad is not necessarily going to be the easiest thing for them to do. So I would say you have to start from a place that it's an interesting idea to move abroad. You see it as a safety step. Again, anyone with family members who are LGBTQ, especially trans, anyone with children who are gender non-binary, even neurodiverse, or have immigrants in their family, they're on a different level. Like they really have to get out. And so you can sort of say they put everything else aside and they focus on safety, right?
Right.
Then you have this
Okay. Yeah.
entire group of people who maybe have always thought about living abroad, and now it seems more and more a better idea. Especially these are people with children who they're worried about school shootings, they're worried about the violence and the division in America, the lack of health care, the affordability crisis, all of these issues. Then they're really motivated by a desire to find a better life for them and their family, right? So that's a big motivating factor. And sometimes older teenagers really struggle with this, but if your children are young, it's usually a big, exciting adventure. They really
Hmm.
adjust well and they integrate well and they learn a whole new language at a native level. So it's a great opportunity. And then there are people, retirees, who are also like, they have kids and they have adult kids, but sometimes their adult kids come with them as well. We have multi-generations
Oh.
of families moving to the Netherlands. It's very common. Also to Spain, like the children might come on a digital nomad visa or even a student visa if they're a bit younger. And the parents go on a passive income visa. So that can happen that multiple generations of a family also go. But it also can be that these days we can remain pretty attached to our family via Zoom, FaceTime,
Hmm.
Facebook, texting, phone calls. We're a much more connected society. And not that many people live like right by their family anymore anyway.
Hmm.
So this is just, you're just a little bit further. You may have some hours between you. And there are options also for people who want to be in the same time zone. You can go to Latin America. You might be able to go to Canada, depending. It's not that easy, but it is a possibility for some people. And so there are ways around the obstacles. In my experience, people who really want to go will work through all of the negatives and figure out how to make it work. And people who don't want to go, who ultimately it's just too hard for them, will find reasons for it to not be possible. And I think it is a mindset. I also see a lot of division within couples between the husband and the wife.
Oh.
The husband, especially white men, they don't feel scared. They've lived with a lot of privilege in America. I know we're not allowed to say privilege anymore, but they have. They've lived with a lot of safety, so they don't see the dangers that their wives see quite often and that other people see. Recent survey showed that 40% of women, I think it's age 25 to 60, I can't remember the age level, but it's like most women, 40% of most American women would love to move abroad. You don't see those kind of numbers among men. And that often can be a challenge when the husband doesn't feel afraid or the boyfriend doesn't feel afraid and the wife or girlfriend does.
That is super interesting. How you're talking about safety for women, because for me, at my age, I'm 69 right now. I moved to Poland 11 years ago, and in America, I had some white male bosses, and this is not to condemn or put all white men in one bucket. I'm just sharing my experience in my workplace where I felt very unsafe in elevators when my boss would get in private meetings with bosses where I was, had some sexual encounters with bosses and had to remove myself from the company in several different situations in America. And here in Poland, at my age, white woman, white haired, little old lady, I feel so free and so safe. I do some work over at the local university with the students over there, and I have no problem at night walking from the university to my home or taking a bus or a tram or a train anywhere by myself. And I am frightened. I've taken a bus once in San Diego. It was a frightening
Mhm.
experience. And I
Very,
took a
yeah.
bus once from San Diego to Phoenix, Arizona, and was we the when the bus driver announced, if you happen to fall asleep and you wake up and your possessions are gone, you don't tell me. And like that was, I I felt totally unsafe. And
Yes.
here, I have never been approached. I have never felt unsafe. It's a totally different experience in a country where my friends and family will say, you're so close to Russia, aren't you afraid? And that rarely enters my mind or the minds of my dear friends and other expat friends that I've made here.
Well, first of all, let me say you look amazing. That I would
Thank
have
you.
never guessed 69. You look fantastic. But secondly, I think the issue of safety is just much larger for women. There's also the issue of reproductive choice. I absolutely feel incredibly safe walking my dogs at night in Holland. The streets are completely safe. I mean, I guess I could get mugged at some point, but violent crime is almost unheard of. It's about 1/10 of the rate of the US. And also, you just don't have the kind of hostility towards women that you have face on a daily basis in the US, I find.
Yes,
The,
yes.
the laws against reproductive choice, the attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion that leave women feeling that, oh, we got here on our own, but now suddenly we're all being painted with this brush that we weren't qualified for our job. And that's purposeful. I mean, it's a very common part of autocratic, autocratic. I'm not saying it
Autocratic.
autocratic governments. It's a common point of autocratic and fascist governments that women's rights are rolled back and that their position is lower than men. And that's happening in the US and it's been happening for quite a while. So I think you really feel the difference in Europe where it's much more egalitarian on every level, not just between women and men, but also between income levels. And
Yes.
and all of that. It's a much flatter society where minimum wage jobs are living wages, where you can actually have a good life on low paid jobs. So it's just a flatter, more safe, more fair society. And I think that gives you a sense of confidence. And women have equal rights that you don't have in the States anymore and that are increasingly being rolled back.
I'm so glad that we're talking about this. I never know where somebody might stand on all these, especially for those that are listening. But this is a real conversation between two women that are both American expats and the experiences that we have been through. And thank you, Jana, for sharing all of that. So, what about finances? What does it look like? How much does it cost to actually move abroad? What might be the time frame from start to finish?
Okay, these are good questions. I'm afraid that how much does it cost is the same question as how long is a piece of string. So you can do it cheaply, like you could, go across the border to Mexico if you had a Mexican parent, get your passport, get a job. You might not need much money at all, right? But
Mhm.
let's say you wanted to move to Europe and one of the countries where you need a year's rent up front or you need to buy a house. Like if you move to Ireland, one of the requirements for a passive income visa is that you have 50,000 euros of passive income each for a couple per year, plus you have enough cash to buy a house. So that would be expensive. Or there are
Mhm.
options like in Malta, you can qualify for a passport in Malta relatively quickly if you contribute €1 million to the Maltese government. Which does come with benefits like tax breaks and things like that, but it's more money than most people have. So really, the range can be massive. And there are very inexpensive places to go. You can look at Albania, where you can live on $1,000 a month of Social Security, for instance, possibly Portugal on a little bit more. So, there are two costs, like how do you live on an ongoing basis? If you're a retiree, you have probably about 60 countries around the world that welcome you. And that can be from a very low amount to needing a lot of money, like Ireland or Malta. So, it really just depends. And then the move itself doesn't have to be expensive. Like if you have to sell a house, you could end up with a lot of cash left over, for instance. You can also, we advise people normally to sell their cars, sell their furniture, sell all of the things instead of shipping them. Because you don't know what your house is going to be like in the new country. It might be a lot smaller than you're used to. It might not be the same style as your old house. So really, it doesn't have to be terribly expensive if you don't ship a whole lot. If you don't ship your entire house full of things, don't ship your car, it can be inexpensive. Also, how you decide to go. Like if say you have 3 dogs and they're all snub nosed, and you're going to have to use a shipper for them, or you're going to have to get on one of those flights that cost, 8 to 10,000 one way because you can take your dog on with you. So there are really so many ways to do it. There are so many factors, but that's part of your planning. Like, how much is this going to cost me?
Okay.
And how am I going to do it? Where am I going? Where can I afford to go? And also, can I work there or not work there? Is this going to be, passive income, or am I going to be an entrepreneur? How am I going to fund my new life? But in general, I will say that most people who move from the US abroad say that life is less expensive. Issues
Mhm.
like healthcare, which are incredibly expensive in the US,
Mhm.
especially for self-employed people, but even for people who have jobs and have to pay large deductibles and copays and all of that, and contributions towards premium. I pay I paid in 2 months what I pay for the whole year here for health insurance. All my health insurance, deductible, and treatments is like the equivalent of 2 months of what I paid back home. So there are a lot
Mhm.
of savings in areas like healthcare, transportation. Food is generally cheaper most places in Europe, because of the difference in tipping culture, for instance. You're more
Yes.
to pay close to what the restaurant bill actually, if a dish says it's 25 euros in Europe, it really is 25 euros. You might round up when you get your whole bill together. But it's not the same as in the US, where you add tax and then you add 25 or 30% tip, which makes things really expensive, because people are paid a living wage, including wait staff in restaurants. So generally speaking, most people find that the cost of living is lower in Europe. Of course, you have to keep in mind that dollar is falling, continuing to
Mhm.
fall, which will make it harder for people on passive income. But for people who are working abroad, it shouldn't impact you. Well, it could impact a digital nomad, but it would be less impactful for an entrepreneur or highly skilled migrant who'd be paid in the local currency.
Mhm. Yeah, as far as the exchange rate, we have noticed that, and with our Social Security payments, both my
Yes.
husband and I, and when we look at what it was several years ago compared to what it is now, I never, as an American, living in America, I never really paid much attention to the stock market or the exchange rates or the fluctuation of the currency. I just thought, oh, that information is for those people. But now,
Now you notice it.
it's a daily thing
Yeah,
that we look at is what's
yeah,
it trading for today, and
yeah.
should we bring money over today, or would it be wise to wait a week? And I have never really thought about that before.
I mean, we're all paying a huge Trump tax right now. The
Yeah.
dollar has fallen a lot in the last few weeks, even. And that is something you need to keep in mind, and work around it if you can. If you can have income elsewhere, that's a way that it won't matter so much if your income is in another currency.
Hmm. And do you have experts and people that can help somebody that's moving abroad with taxes or finances or those things? Yes.
Yes, we always have, that's always one of the considerations. And we have, especially in the last month, we've had some quite wealthy clients, way more than before. I think since the murder of Renee Good, a lot has changed. A lot of wealthier Americans are now wanting to get out. So we always say to them, you really need to analyze what the difference in the tax rate, what impact that will have, and what you can do to mitigate taxes before you move. There are most countries in Europe have wealth tax, or capital gains tax, which you also have in the US. And so you need to figure out what that's going to look like and what that's going to cost. And it varies by country. So normally speaking, that's why the first thing we do is help you figure out what are the countries you could go to. Let's say you get to
Okay.
two or three, and you can't decide, then we say, well, go take a trip. Like, go do a scouting trip, visit France, Germany, and the Netherlands, and then decide, like, which of those do
Hmm.
you feel like you want to live in, like which is the best for you. And then once you decide that, then you need experts on the ground. So we partner with relocation consultants and coaches across Europe. So if in the first call with me, we figure out that Germany is really your best option by far, and you're interested in Germany, then I connect you with my partner in Germany. If you're still thinking, oh, maybe it's Spain or Portugal, then I connect you with my partners there, and you decide what you want to do. But a lot of times people have multiple choices. I would say most people have multiple choices. So often that involves just thinking through, like, what is this going to cost me? What's the cost of living? Which has the easiest visa for me? Where do I have the best chance for a passport, et cetera? But then it's also taxation. Some
Hmm.
countries have relatively high taxation for pensioners, and other countries have really low taxes. So if you're quite wealthy, that's going to be an important concern. If you're not, it's probably less of an issue. And those experts really are per country. So you kind of have to figure out first where you
Right.
want to go, and then we connect you with the experts.
Oh, that's interesting. It's also interesting that you talk about how people generally have multiple places or countries that they can go to. I find that pretty fascinating. That and I think I would guess that people don't realize that they have multiple options.
They're really I don't want to say ignorant, but people really don't understand what their options are. I would say half of the people that come to us say, I'd like to relocate to Norway or Canada or something like that, which is really, I mean, it's not impossible, but really, really, really hard for most people. And so it's really educating them about what the options are and the kind of visa that they could get. And also, most people don't even understand that they're eligible for a second passport based on their grandparents or great grandparents. So
Uh-huh.
often that's also part of the discussion. We never encourage people to use the passport as the way to go abroad. We encourage them to use a visa to go abroad because most people are kind of in a big hurry these days to get out. The timeline
Yeah.
has really
Yeah.
shrunk
Yeah.
for people wanting to leave. So we encourage them to figure out where they want to go, and then figure out what other passports they might be eligible for within a year or two, because it usually takes a year or two to get another passport. So,
Okay.
but people don't know what their options are almost never. I mean, they almost never are correct about the countries they think they want to go to. And that's why it's important to have that initial call and work, because people don't understand what are these four types of visas. People
Hmm.
think that they can't go because they're too old, or that, that they don't
Hmm.
have enough money or whatever. People just are really wrong about what their prospects are.
So it's also fascinating. When we left the US, we literally either sold or gave away all of our belongings
Mhm.
and came over with each with a 50-pound suitcase. And that's what we started our
That's
life
great.
here
Yeah.
in
We
Poland
advise
with.
that.
And I'll tell you honestly, when people ask me about my journey or say, "Oh, I want to live abroad. What should I take?" and I say nothing. Don't take anything. It sounds kind of ridiculous, but even your jeans don't look the same. Like
No, you want new things usually. I have to confess I wasn't as good as you. I brought four the max weight suitcases, two for my
okay.
husband to check and two for me. And I shipped another box of things that I didn't need most of them, but I at
Hmm.
the time I got rid of so much stuff. So I shipped, and that was expensive. I mean, just with
Yeah.
minimum stuff, just basically kitchen stuff, artwork. And I have this habit of collecting what's called Fiesta ware. And
Love it. Love it.
so I shipped this like a small contain, not a container, but like a piece of a
Yeah.
container. And that cost me like $4,200 or $4,600 or something. It was like not cheap. In
Yeah.
retrospect, if I probably should have gotten rid of more of it, or found a
Hmm.
cheaper way to do it. But at the time you got so much going on, and
Hmm.
weeding through everything is difficult for most people. But no, that
Yes.
probably when you get it there, you're going to be like, why did I bring all this stuff? So just
Yes.
thinking ahead and thinking, I think one suitcase for me would have been tough, but what I have is enough, or it's too much even. So
So, my sister recently purchased a condo in Spain,
Hmm.
and she is now working through how she's still doing the 90-90. So for those people that don't understand the
Oh, the Schengen
90-90,
shuffle. Yeah.
yes, yes. So essentially, she's only allowed to stay in Spain for 90 days, and then she has to go away for 90 days
Where does she
or
go?
back to America.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry.
She goes back to America?
She goes back to America. Yeah, she has a home in both places, and she's now deciding, with the expenses that she just she's in America right now in Maine, and she just got her electric bill, and she was like, "This is almost as much as it cost me a month to live in Spain."
Yeah. Yeah.
So she is at the point where she is now deciding, is she ready to commit, and what does that look like? And we also have ancestry. Our ancestry is from Italy, so she is looking to see if that's also a possibility for her. I
So
need
there are a
to
lot.
hook the two of you up, by the way.
Okay, I love that. There are a lot of Americans who were in process of getting their Italian passport by descent, because it used
Yeah.
to go back, like basically any generation that went back to 1860, around that time period. So after Italy was formed originally, but now as the courts have ruled that it has to be grandparents. There is an appeal of that that's happening in March, so that could change everything again. But I know a
Yeah.
lot of Americans who thought they were getting an Italian passport, and now they're starting all over because they're not getting that, which is the reason that we say go with a visa and then worry about later, and then start the process for a second passport later from
Oh,
wherever, because the rules change
okay.
all the time.
Interesting. Interesting. So let's see. What is there another topic that I didn't touch on that we should talk about?
I
That
think one issue is maybe to talk about are the politics of your new country, and maybe the difference between being an expat and being an immigrant, and how that impacts your life. So let's start with just expat versus immigrant.
Okay.
People usually say to me, oh, you're an expat. I'm not an expat. An expat is someone usually sent by your company, like you're a senior executive. you're going somewhere for a few years, your kids are going to the American school or the British school. They're in a private school, a very expensive private school. You probably got a lot of help from your company to move there, and then they're going to send you on to Singapore or Hong Kong or Peoria next, right? So that's an
Yeah.
expat. And expats don't really integrate because they hang out with other Americans, the American Women's Club or
True.
the American Book Club or whatever like that, and they don't really integrate. They don't usually learn the local language, or often don't, and they're only staying a few years. But these days, most of the Americans who are leaving really are leaving. They're putting their kids in public schools. Their kids are learning the language. They're trying to learn the language. They're integrating, and they don't know how long they're going to stay. So I think that's a really important distinction. And I think people who view themselves as immigrants open up a whole new world of how to integrate into some of these societies that are slightly different than the one you're used to. Not only do you meet this whole community of people who help each other, like we had 80
Hmm.
people at our Thanksgiving dinner
Hmm.
just a few months ago. And those people are all helping each other with businesses, with networking, with social activities, with whatever, because we form a community of immigrants. And it's very enriching. And also those people integrate more into Dutch society because their kids are going to public school, they're learning Dutch, they all hang out with Dutch people, and they learn and grow as an international citizen rather than an American in a bubble. And I think that's what's really different about this timeline. This is probably much more similar to when people left Europe and went to America, than it is similar to the last 100 years or so, where expats have been sent around the world into US assignments with US companies. So it's just a really different experience. And having that attitude makes you integrate better and helps
Hmm.
sort of speed your life along. And it helps other people understand you better and connect better with you as well. And then the other thing is politics in your new land, in your new country.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Americans don't really understand, for instance, multi-party systems and how parliaments work. So I think it's really important to not to gauge everything in context of the US. For instance, there's a lot of concern about the far right parties in Europe, but actually they're really different than the far right in the US. They're different in that they get a lower percentage of votes than the MAGAs do in the States, or the Republicans do in the States now. They're also generally they are racist and they are anti-immigrant, but they really are not. They're not attacking LGBTQ people for the most part. They are not against women for the most part. They're not Christian fascists. They are Christo-fascists. They are far right anti-immigrant parties for the most part. But more importantly, in part of a parliament, they are highly unlikely to have any impact in government or less impact in government because of the coalitions and the way coalitions work. So in Germany and in the Netherlands, they won large percentages of the vote, 20 to 30%, still a lot less than 50%. But they're not involved at all in government. They're not allowed to govern because they're anti-democratic. The other parties don't want to
Okay.
work with them. And so they really are not invited to participate, and they usually go away pretty quickly. I mean, clearly, we're in a dangerous time across the world, and it's
Hmm.
important to not be blind to that, to pay attention to where you're going. But it is important to understand the difference between a multi-party parliamentary democratic system than a two-party system, which really doesn't function very well anymore.
Hmm. That both of these, the expat versus the immigrant and the politics, I find a really interesting topic. The one thing that I often say to people about my experience as now that I know, you have corrected me, as an immigrant to Poland, I now carry a Polish passport, which I'm super proud of. I worked very
Yes.
hard. I worked
Yes.
very hard to get it. It was not
Yeah.
because of my husband that I was able to get a Polish passport.
Yeah.
It was something that I worked very hard to get, and um, but I often say to people, uh, my feeling about living abroad is that you have to want to integrate into the society. Like one thing that I adore about Poland is the way that they love their country, the cultural things that happen here, the festivals, the
Yes.
food,
Yes.
the way they drink, the way they eat, the way they come together, the communities that they
Got a
build.
long, rich history. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I often say that when I travel, I like to travel like a native. I'm not going to stay in an American hotel. I'm not going to stay in a Marriott or a Holiday Inn or along the way. I'm going to stay in a neighborhood where I get to feel something different. I've had Americans come over here, for instance, and complain to me that in Poland, we don't have a top sheet, for instance. We don't have a top flat sheet.
You have
We
the
go
feather
right
bed like in Germany.
right? We go right from a fitted sheet on the mattress to a duvet cover that is made out of sheet material that's what gets washed every week when you do your laundry. And I've had Americans that come over and complain about that. So, I always say you need to want to travel like a native or eat like a native,
Yes.
become involved.
Well,
And as far,
sorry, go
yes,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was just saying, my
Um,
business partner Bethany has this thing that she always says, "Oh, I love having Dutch problems. Like they're so like, these are minor problems in the overall scheme of things. Whether the sheet is the sheet that you want or the bed is configured the way you want it, these are good problems to have."
exactly. And as far as the politics, I think that is a super important lesson is to learn here in the city that I live in Poland. We actually happen to have an American library called the American Corner. Many of them around the globe are called American Spaces. There are 600 of them around the world, excuse me, and they are American libraries. And in those libraries, um, I have had the opportunity to work with the librarian on teaching me, giving me the information that I need in English because I don't read Polish yet in a way that I can understand it, so that I can uh, understand more of what's happening and not again be that outsider. Like
Yeah.
I may not have it all, I may not understand everything down to the last degree, but at least I can have a conversation with somebody and be curious about the country that I have chosen to live in. I think that is super important. One other question that I have is, we see
Sorry,
a lot. Oh,
can I
yes.
just say, I have a hard stop at 2:30.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
I just sort
All
of,
right.
yeah.
Great. One last question, real quick. So there's a lot of stuff in the news. Barcelona, for instance, doing all the protests against Americans. What can you give anybody an idea of what that's all about?
Yeah, I think that there are some countries in which Americans pushing up the cost of housing is bringing it home to locals, the cost of having Americans come. The main country that I see that happening in Europe is Portugal. I also hear about it some in Spain and some in the Netherlands. But I have to say, almost every American immigrant who I've spoken to has said that people on a day-to-day basis, by and large, almost 100%, are very welcoming and understand that we did not support Trump. We do not support Trump. We are leaving, or we have left because we want to come to a better country, and we've chosen their country. In the Netherlands, they're incredibly friendly and helpful for those of us here. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I think
Thank
that
you.
is a wonderful way to wrap this up. I will put in the comments ways to get a hold of Jana.
Yes,
As
thank
you
you.
can see, she's a wealth of knowledge here, and I would suggest that you at least follow her. Her company name is GTFO Tours. Jana, thank you so much for this time.
Thank you so
and
much.
Let's keep this conversation going.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.